Hi, this is Shondell Joyce. Join me for a demonstration in color temperature and painting these piglets. I always start off with the rule of thirds on my photo reference. This helps me figure out where my focal points will be. Here you can see they intersect right down the center of one piglet and frame the other. So I make a value sketch and a color study. These two preliminary sketches are where I do all my planning for the painting. So the value sketch shows me the order that everything will be painted in. I'll start with my darkest darks and work to my lightest lights. The color study helps me to set out the palette. So let's take a closer look at the sketch. Here you can see the rule of thirds marks. The rule of thirds is a photographic reference, and it divides the surface into thirds horizontally and vertically. This gives me an idea of where the piglets should wind up in my painting. It also helps me see where to put the focal points. You don't want to put anything dead center. That's kind of a dead zone. So instead, I want the focal points to coincide with the intersections of the rule of thirds lines. Most of those are going to happen naturally with the darkest parts of the piglets and the lightest lights and the highlights. You can see I have pre-sketched my ampersand pastel board using sighting and sight sizing. This is a long process for another video, so use the method most comfortable for you to get your piglets onto the paper before you get started. I use sighting and sight sizing and usually use a paintbrush or a pencil as a measuring tool. I never use a ruler. A ruler has me counting. Counting puts me on the left side of my brain instead of the right side of my brain, so I want to avoid that. The value sketch is where I do most of my planning. The value sketch shows me where the darkest darks and the lightest lights are, so I know where my focal point will be. The color study helps me to decide which of the thousands of pastels that I happen to have am I actually going to use on this painting. It also helps me decide the palette. In this case, I'm going with red and green. These are the pastels I'm going to use. I'll introduce them one by one, but I always set them aside so that you can see them. The first is true green. This green is a little warmer. I'm also using a lighter version and a cooler version, which is the teal. This version here is a cooler version. So I have true green, a warmer and a cooler version, and teal. I also have a lighter version of teal and a very light version. So these are my intense greens. They're on the green side. For the reds on the opposite side, well, I'm going to start off with a dark chocolate brown, which is the color red that you would get if you mixed a little green in and neutralized it. I'm also going with a cool version of a pink flesh tone and a lighter version of the same color, and then a pure pink for a pop color. And this is where the red comes in. I'm using a lighter version of pink for the warm parts of the piglets and a touch of lavender. This is like a cool version of pink. It would be like a cool red violet. In terms of neutrals, I'm using a yellow ochre and two warm light yellows. Both are versions of yellow ochre. I always start off with my darkest dark, and that's the chocolate reddish brown. So this is a dark version of brown. You would get this color if you mixed dark green in with red if you were painting. I am putting all the darks in on both the piglets. I work the whole painting at the same time. That's the best method. I don't want to work just one area up and then move to the next and work it up. Instead, I do the whole painting at once and I work from light to dark. I'm always putting a little bit of dark in the foreground to create a sense of perspective. Next, I'm moving to the darkest red. This is like a flesh tone color. It's maybe a shady flesh tone color. It's like a shadow crossing over. So it's a darker pink. I'm putting all the shadowy parts of the piglets with this darker pink. And this is going to be underneath a lot of the hair on the piglets. So you'll see little bits of it peeking out later. Next color up. Oh, gotta fix that nose. I scumble to create some texture. I don't want the areas to be too perfect or mask-like on these cute little animals. So I'm scumbling to create some texture. Okay, this is the pop color, and I'm putting it in the sunlit ears. You can see they're backlit and the sun is coming through them, which makes them extraordinarily pink. I don't want to use that color in just one place, so I work it around in a few different places so that your eye will travel from place to place. If you put a pop color in just one spot, it'll be like an eye magnet and very hard to take your eye off. On top of this, I'm putting the magenta color. This is the cool version of pink. It's like a lavender magenta. And I'm putting it in a few spots close to the pop color. Next is a lighter version of pink. It's one step lighter than the flesh tone. And I'm using it to help define the light shapes. This is where the warm light would be. In terms of color temperature, most of the pink areas are going to be warmer in general. Some will be cooler, and that's the magenta. This color is some reflected light. It's a little bit of warmth, mostly underneath where the green grass and the pink flowers are reflecting up on the piglets. I always test my colors on the photo reference ahead of time. I'm moving to the greens. This is a cool color for the face of the piglet. It shows that the front part of the head is in shadow. So the coolness helps to show off the backlight behind the pigs. Back to the magenta, just to go on top of this, create some dimension, some texture. That helps the snout to come forward. I'm also using it on some of the legs and the sides. Now for the second pig, I work them up at the same time, trying not to work them up separately or be too careful and overwork one. I'm also using the face of the pastel so that I get a lot of coverage. And I have sped up the video. I don't drink that much coffee, so I don't usually move that fast or paint that quickly. So if you're painting along with me, you can always pause it. Now I'm using some of the pink just to reinforce the shape of the nose. And I'm coming back in with that cool greenish color to define the head. The pigs are starting to take shape and looking a lot more clear. I am working from dark to light here. I usually work from dark to light with one of the two complements first, like I do almost all of the reds first, then almost all of the greens first, and integrate when I have to. Next is a warmer white, which is the part of the piglet that's being lit up by the sun. This is more of a highlight color, so I'm all the way to the lightest lights. And the lightest lights are really going to make the little piglets pop. So now you got a real sense of where that light's coming from. Putting in some background behind the piglets, this is the yellow ochre. It's not quite as light as the lightest light, but it helps to position the piglets in space, create a sense of perspective. On top, I am putting in a touch of teal, because a painting just isn't a painting without a touch of teal. What I love about teal is it's blue-green, so it pushes the background back and brings the foreground forward. So I'm going to flip the painting upside down so that the powder from the pastel doesn't drip on top of the lights. This will keep the lights pure and the background strong. Now you get a real sense of perspective. On top of this, I'm layering a cool green. This cool green will help push the grasses that are right underneath the pigs towards the background. Again, flip it upside down so I don't pollute the white. And I'm going to do a little pastel magic and blend these colors with my fingers so that the background is soft and muted, and the mark making on the pigs is different than the mark making in the background. The texture difference helps create a sense of perspective. Already you got a feel for the painting. In the middle ground, I'm painting the pure green. This is a beautiful, warm, golden green. I'm blocking in with it and creating a lovely foreground, going on top of some of the darks in the foreground and some of the pinks in the foreground. This helps to create some texture. I let my marks be different in the foreground than in the background. The foreground needs to be rougher so that you can see some individual grasses and some roughness to the texture. This helps differentiate it from the background. Look at those little cuties. Don't you want to just give them a kiss? Now that I have this painting roughly blocked in, it's time to put in some of the grasses and the flowers. So I'm bringing back that pop pink and some of the colors that I used on the pigs for the petals of the flowers. So this is the same pink that's in the pigs. I try not to introduce new colors because in the landscape, the colors will bounce around. So even though they're white pigs, I hardly use any white at all. I use warmer and cooler versions of pink and green to get the actual color of the pigs. I'm using some of those warmer colors on the flowers. The flowers that are closer are bigger, more clearly defined. The flowers that are further back are not as clearly defined. Now that I have the background blocked in, I can come in and do the backlighting around the pigs and create the beautiful highlight that separates the pigs from the landscape. So every plane that's facing the light is going to get a little edge. Don't fall into the habit of outlining, because it isn't an outline, it's planar values. It's just the parts of the pig that are facing the light. Notice that the legs and the underside of the pigs don't have any of that backlighting. The sun is overhead and behind them. It isn't hitting what's underneath. Just the reflected light hits underneath. Now I'm going to go through and judiciously blend, and that is it. Just a few touches.